Joining us now, former FBI General Counsel and MSNBC legal analyst Andrew Weissmann, New York Times reporter and MSNBC contributor Jeremy Peters, and former U.S. Army captain and Iraq War veteran Allison Jaslow. Andrew, the arguments yesterday, we played a little bit of them here on this show, and in the initial argument from the government, it did appear that the judges were skeptical of the argument that the Trump administration was making, that he could just deploy the National Guard whenever he saw fit without a reason. Then a bit later, when California got up to argue their side of this, the judges were also pretty skeptical. And so much so, it seems that they're leaning toward allowing Donald Trump to have this power. What will that mean for the expansion of presidential powers?
So the government took a maximalist view of the executive's power, and they argued that the court simply has no basis to review anything they do in terms of the president calling up and federalizing the National Guard. One of the judges who was appointed by Donald Trump asked the question, which was a good one, which was, but are you saying if there was no violence at all in Los Angeles? Or are you saying if there was no violence anywhere in the country, that the president could simply say that he's calling up the National Guard because he thinks that there's concern about a rebellion either in Los Angeles or, frankly, anywhere in the country? That was the question that that judge put to the government, and they said that the court has no place whatsoever to judge that it is solely within the executive's power, the president's power. And they're relying on an 1827 Supreme Court case, which does largely support that position, the sort of maximalist view. And so you have the Trump administration clearly banking on the fact that the Ninth Circuit has to follow even a very, very old Supreme Court case. So that, I think, is why you're seeing the Supreme Court as the court that's ultimately going to have to decide this. And the Ninth Circuit, I think, may feel like its sort of hands are tied by that 1827 precedent.
So I've got a question about the Trump administration is arguing rebellion, but what is the difference here between that argument and just political dissent, normal American political dissent and demonstrations on the streets against policies, which we have seen throughout our history?
Sure. So the district judge said there's a world of difference, that you cannot consider in any way, shape, or form protected First Amendment activity, and actually laid out a test that requires for it to be a rebellion, that there be a danger in terms of violence, that it be concerted, that it be ongoing, and that it be aimed at the government as a whole, that it not be just sort of one-off activity in the course of peaceful protests. To be clear, the government's view here is that that is totally wrong, because they think the court shouldn't have any role whatsoever. And that basically is saying we can decide whatever we want. In other words, Congress says that there has to be a rebellion as one of the prerequisites, but the executive is saying we get to decide that there's a rebellion, even if the courts think there's no facts whatsoever to support that. Their view is that the courts have no place to decide that. But to be fair, Katie, that 1827 Supreme Court case is pretty strong in terms of the government's view here. And that's why I think this ultimately is going to have to end up, as the Ninth Circuit said. They said, basically, we may be bound by this old case, so we really can't do anything about it. You may have to take this up to the Supreme Court.
All right. I want to come back to where the Supreme Court might fall on this in a second. But, Allison, I want to talk to you about just the purpose of it right now. I mean, the protests in Los Angeles, which, by the way, we had reporters there, they were largely peaceful. I mean, there were some antagonizers here and there, but the protests themselves were largely peaceful, even at the time, according to our reporters on the ground, when the National Guard was forcefully pushing them back. We have 2,000 more National Guard troops activated in Los Angeles. The curfew has been lifted. As I understand it, there's not violence on the streets right now. So what's going on?
I mean, that's something for the administration to answer. What I'm most concerned about and what doesn't get talked about enough is what critical mission were those Marines on before they were pulled off of that mission for the sake of pulling a stunt. And in Congress last week, we were told that it's costing $134 million to do this operation. And what does that mean we're not investing in for the war fighters that this administration says that they are 100% for, that's going to put them at risk potentially in their next deployment? So I think talking about the trade-offs and the cost-benefit of having an operation like this to our overall national security is what we need to be having a
Can you bring me into, I know you can't speak for individuals, but just broadly the mindset of National Guard troops, Marines that are going into Los Angeles to keep the peace. This is the sort of thing that doesn't happen by and large here in this country. When the National Guard is deployed, I mean, the biggest instance that I can remember in our past was for the desegregation of schools. I mean, that was a major political moment, and this doesn't seem to be on that level at all. So what could they be thinking as they're being asked to go do this?
Well, as a service member, you take orders. So they're going to do their duty as they're being told.
Of course.
And the National Guard is actually mobilized for lots of different reasons. Natural disasters, the pandemic at a large scale. So if they're given orders, they're going to, fulfill them. I think what concerns me more is, are they well prepared to go into an environment like this? Are they well trained for what they're doing? Are they having clarity of mission as to why they are being mobilized in an event like this? And it happened really quickly. So I don't know that they got all of the tools that they needed to be successful in that environment.
Jeremy, you've been talking to LA voters. How are they feeling about what they've been experiencing in their city?
I think there is a sense of what protests. A lot of people don't even know that they're going on because they're so the protest activity is so localized to an area of downtown or little pockets here and there. But most people are going about their daily lives not even knowing what was going on last week, other than they're experiencing it the way that you and I were on social media. Or through television.
What's interesting about that, and just to be, I think everyone knows this, LA is a giant place.
Yeah.
It's huge. And so what's happening in one pocket of LA very much does not affect the rest of Los Angeles. I mean, even during the LA riots, a lot of Los Angeles was operating as normal. And that was certainly
not normal.
Yeah, not normal. And that was a much bigger case. But it is very big. And when you see these images on social media, they're capturing one moment in one specific section, or oftentimes just getting a corner of something.
Yeah.
And that does give the appearance that it's crazier than it might be.
Sure. But I think the numbers kind of speak for themselves, right? You have how many thousands of National Guard deployed and how many people that they've actually arrested during these protests. It's a very small number because there weren't a lot of people breaking the law. The people that we saw lighting cars on fire, smashing windows at federal buildings, those people should be locked up. They should be arrested. But you don't need thousands of National Guard troops to defend the city against, a few dozen troublemakers.
And
the
LAPD is equipped to do this. The LAPD has a lot of resources at their back. Why can't the LAPD handle this?
That's not something I have answers about. I think the whole scenario feels like a big flex by the administration. I think it's pretty clear. And it's just unfortunate that our men and women who are serving in uniform are caught up in the middle of it.
But in talking about just the images that are captured on social media, I mean, a lot of it and the fighting, it does look very much from the outside like something Donald Trump would want to see. It's a Trump ad.
Exactly, and expect that it will be a Trump ad because he was waiting for this moment. I mean, that's what one of the voters that my colleagues and I spoke with said, how could you not see this coming? I think that guy is exactly right. We knew Trump was going to do this. He wanted a do-over for the summer of 2020 when he felt like he should have done more with his authority to crack down on the riots that did take place. And there was very serious violence and looting that took place unlike what we're seeing happen in L.A. now. And this president who styles himself a modern day Law and Order man is really like it's such a peculiar relationship he has with law enforcement and the military, because he puts them in positions of extreme vulnerability and danger. Look what, like, whether it's January 6th or now sending the military into Los Angeles when, you know, they don't have, by some accounts, places to sleep.
Yeah, there was that one image of them on the floor. Andrew, really fast, I just want to button this up with you because I teased it. What might the Supreme Court decide on this case? Because they've already given him quite a bit of immunity. And there does seem to be some discomfort from the outside looking in on just how much Donald Trump has taken that and run with it within some pockets of this Supreme Court. So do you have a sense of how this might play out if it ultimately gets there?
I do. Obviously, this is speculation, but hopefully it's educated speculation. And that is the court, I think you can look to what it's been doing in the Alien Enemies Act, the immigration cases, where, you know, it has found 9-0, not once, but twice against the administration, saying that they have violated due process. And they did, in fact, say that the court has a role in interpreting statutes. It has a role in pushing back against illegal conduct by the executive. So if the Ninth Circuit thinks that it's bound by this early 19th century case, I could see at least 5 votes, which is what it takes in the Supreme Court. It's about getting to 5 votes where the Supreme Court says, you know what, the courts are allowed to interpret statutes. It is not the executive who can just sort of make it up as they go along. As you've said, Katie, there has to be some evidence of a rebellion. There has to be some evidence that the state officials can't do their job without the feds needing to participate, and that the courts have a role there. So I think that's sort of the key issue for the Supreme Court.